Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we're discussing an example of the respect that can exist between two chapters of the Astartes, with the Space Wolves and the Silver Skulls. A spoiler warning to begin, as the events we're discussing today are from the Warhammer 40k story, The Gildar Rift, by author Sarah Cawkwell. As always, I really recommend you read the stories for yourself first, without spoilers, as that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Okay, now, one of the great things about Guilliman's Codex Astartes is that rather than just a few legions to see relations and interactions between, we instead of course now have countless chapters out there. A whole host of different manners and temperaments, ways of thinking, and traditions. There truly is a limitless amount of friendships, brotherhoods, and rivalries that can be spawned and exist out there. And a great example of one of those, and how it affects a chapter's actions, is the apparent respect between the Silver Skulls chapter and the Space Wolves, which was shown within the novel The Gildar Rift. Now, the Gildar system within the Imperium is a particularly valuable cluster of worlds. However, it is also one beset with plentiful dangers in terms of navigation and travel. A beyond immense asteroid belt, the primary concern. The thusly named Gildar Rift is the name of the shipping channel used by the Imperium to navigate safely in and out of the system. And the asteroid belt itself is perilous enough, but the fact that it is heavily used by pirates, renegades and Xenos to attack the slow passing shipping only increases the danger tenfold. And thus, the Gildar system and Rift in particular is patrolled and kept safe by the Silver Skulls chapter. The Skulls run a tight ship, demanding that each and every vessel reports to them immediately upon entering the system, and they escort many vessels through the Rift itself, ensuring they are kept safe. Interestingly, the Silver Skulls don't have any record from what bloodline they are descended from, though an extensive research effort conducted by the chapter's apothecaries came back as they are most likely an Ultramarine successor. However, despite this, the chapter has a heavy prevalence on its chapter librarians, highly valuing the use of psychic power. And it would be through the prognostications of the librarian named Brand that a Silver Skull captain named Aaron would be made aware of a danger approaching. A danger that would turn out to be a Space Wolf vessel, lifelessly drifting through the rift. The ship-wide Vox crackled into static-charged life. "Captain Aaron, your presence is required on the bridge, my lord." There was a pause, little more than a heartbeat. "We have a new incursion. Augury returns are showing no power to the newcomer's main plasma drives. She's just drifting. Looks like a derelict." Aaron's eyebrows rose. "Perhaps you should learn to trust your feelings, prognosticator." Brand inclined his head, wishing that the brief taste of a possible future had not happened. The captain activated the Vox bead in his ear. "On my way. Anything more you can tell me?" "Designation?" "Yes, sir." There was a faint hint of disbelief in the Vox operator's voice. "Livery is that of the Space Wolves chapter. We have run the ship's markings through the cogitators. We've made a positive identification." Brand and Aaron exchanged looks. The Sons of Russ had been known to periodically pass through the Gildar Rift, but they were always diligent about making their intentions known. The Silver Skulls had a long-standing comradeship with the chapter. The two shared a number of similar traits. Aaron felt his ire begin to creep back. He would not be best pleased with his opposite number for this breach of protocol. What is the ship? The Wolf of Fenris, sir. She's transmitting a distress message. So, right from the off here, from the mere identification of this vessel being of the Space Wolf chapter, we get the immediate signs of the respect held between the two, the previously established relationship, the hint of disbelief in the Vox operator's voice as he reveals it is a Space Wolf ship, revealing a clear shock at the situation, maybe a strength that the Wolves must generally display for the Vox operator to be feeling this way, and also how the Wolves are here without them knowing, as reinforced by the thoughts of Captain Aaron. The Sons of Russ had been known to periodically pass through the Gildar Rift, but they were always diligent about making their intentions known. The Silver Skulls had a long-standing comradeship with the chapter. The two shared a number of similar traits. So the Wolves had a history of diligently announcing and reporting their presence to the Skulls, a mark of their respect returned, especially from the Space Wolves too, who we know aren't usually a stickler for rules and protocol. And as such, Aaron at least feels there's a long-standing comradeship there, a history fostered of cooperation, despite their very different natures. It's the perfect example of how two chapters can create a bond of cooperation and brotherhood in a way, how they can find the common ground between them, as evidenced here by the claim of similar traits, not something that's usually found without continued interaction. But so the story would continue, with Aaron asking to hear the repeated distress call from the vessel, a mixture of static and carnage, the fourth great company, seemingly boarded by an unknown enemy, with a Ginril Bluetooth stated to be dead, presumably the vessel and strike forces commander. And the Skulls begin to discuss a course of action to take, obviously unwilling to leave the vessel adrift. And they refer to the Wolves as their cousins. Again, a little telltale sign of the bond there. However, also, they discuss how even if all the Wolves aboard are indeed dead, they can't simply leave the vessel, that they need to reclaim it. And it's not explicitly stated, but I think it is pretty clear. The Skulls aren't talking about reclaiming it for themselves. They're talking about reclaiming it to save it for the Space Wolves chapter, so they can return it to them. And that is no small undertaking, requiring a lot of effort to even try and get the vessel working again, let alone returning it to another chapter. And so for me, I really find this as a great example and testament to the Silver Skulls character, of what an honourable chapter they can be to those they deem a friend, or at the very least respected. And so the Skulls make plans to send over a boarding party of 2 squads, including an apothecary, to try and find out what on earth has befallen the Wolf of Fenris, and to of course hopefully help any survivors. Though they are of course cautious in regards to possible enemies still being aboard. And this is where the differences between the chapter's characters comes into play. Matthias, Hakan, you will take your squads across to the Wolf of Fenris with a recovery team. Once you have secured the ship, I will deploy servitors and tech adepts to do what they can in terms of salvaging it and making it ready for transit. Ryerus, select 2 of your team to send with them. Brand, do you think we should send young Baius? I think given the Space Wolves' general opinion on my psychic brethren, antagonising them may not be for the best. However, given the circumstances, a psychic presence may be essential. It will help scan for survivors. His tact and diplomacy was admirable. He never once used the words rescue mission. Excellent point, Aaron replied. Well made. Baius goes. In their past dealings, the Space Wolves had shown a strange sort of tolerance for the prognosticatum of the Silver Skulls. Whilst they had no love lost for the psychic children of the far-flung God Emperor, they found the divination methods of the Silver Skulls more in keeping with their own rune priests. It was still prudent not to antagonise them though. A small thing here, but the kind of mindfulness that goes a long way when dealing with another chapter. Another different way of life. As stated by the Skulls, the Wolves had been tolerant of the Silver Skulls' heavy usage of psychers. However, the Skulls are still careful not to irritate them, flaunt it in the Wolves' faces, knowing the Sons of Fenris are not keen on what they deem unclean sorcery. Yes, the need deems that one should accompany the boarding party, but the mere fact that the Skulls debate it, are aware of it, shows the small things that matter when dealing with another chapter. And in the command having had that conversation, that will help to keep it within Baius's mind, should he encounter any Space Wolves still alive. And even that little nod to not calling the boarding a rescue mission, even when the Wolves themselves weren't even present. Just knowing that it would dent the pride of another chapter to have to be saved so. Not calling it a rescue mission now helps them not call it a rescue mission later, when informing the Wolves of what has transpired here. Small things, but little things that help keep a relationship between two chapters good. Even with one you feel you have a good relationship with, as relations are only as good as you keep them. And with any Astartes chapter, the slightest insult can balloon into a big issue and problem. And this leads me on to the realities of the chapter's existence. War. And how those balancing acts continue even then. As the boarding parties unfortunately do not find any surviving loyal sons of Fenris, instead becoming ambushed by traitor Red Corsairs. And the Wolf of Fenris's power levels immediately begin springing to life. And you may think Captain Aaron being confronted by an enemy captured vessel is in a fairly straightforward situation, but it's never so black and white where diplomacy is concerned. And as a Space Wolf vessel, captured or not, Aaron has to contend with a very tricky balancing act before he can commence battle. Aaron's reaction was instantaneous. He had allowed himself a moment's optimism, a spark of hope that Ryrus and his squads had been successful in locating and aiding the Space Wolves. He regretted that moment of laxity now. His orders came out in clipped, precise tones. Get the gunships ready to launch, divert more power to the shield banks, load the prow bombardment cannon, all other weapon batteries on standby. His arms folded across his massive chest. If it's a fight they want, Aaron scowled, his scarred face darkening with anger. Then it's a fight they will get, and we will fight them face to face. Aim to disable rather than destroy. We need that ship intact, if we can manage it. Yes, my lord. Calling all hands. Calling all hands. This is an alpha level emergency. All hands, prepare for combat. This is not a drill. Send out fleet-wide astropathic messages to the other ships in the Rift. They will have been waiting for this. They should all be prepared to mobilise on my command. None of them should be far away if they've stuck to their prescribed course. Yes, my lord. The human serf couldn't keep the tone of impressed awe out of his voice at the realisation that the Silver Skull's master of the fleet had already laid the seeds of a counterstrike seemingly based on little more than intuition. But then, there was a reason why Dairis Aaron had become master of the fleet in the first place. One step ahead, he murmured. Around the bridge, servitors and serfs scurried to carry out Aaron's order. Theirs was never to question. Theirs was just to carry out the will of their masters. Despite a tendency to let his temper flare on occasion, the captain was both respected and even revered amongst the human crew. "You are wise sometimes, Dairis," remarked Brand from his position at Aaron's side. "I occasionally wonder if you need me at all." Aaron shot a glance sideways. Throne, but the prognosticator could move silently when he wanted to. He had appeared seemingly out of nowhere. The captain shrugged, a barely perceptible movement. "Of course I need you here, my friend. I need you to remind me how clever I am." They shared a moment of levity, but it was swiftly replaced by a mutual concern for the safety of their warriors. Both wrestled with the other dilemma that faced them. If it came down to basic survival, if they had to destroy the Wolf of Fenris in self-defense, there would be many questions from the Space Wolves, something which would be hard to validate without proof that they were attacked first. Of course, were the Wolf to fire on them first, it would be recorded in the banks of both ship cogitators. It would still be excruciatingly awkward though. This situation held far-reaching consequences both Silver Skulls were acutely and agonisingly well aware of. So, even faced with an enemy, a vessel that poses a very real risk, Aaron can't risk firing first for the questions that would immediately be raised by the Space Wolf chapter. And as referenced here, even in the best of circumstances, make things incredibly awkward. Aaron is having to judge and balance two opposing risks here. One, the immediate danger, and two, a possibly far graver one for the entire chapter. A war, or at the very least a response, from the Space Wolf chapter. Yes, the Silver Skulls count the Wolves of Fenris as comrades in arms, but how far does that trust go? At what point does a word no longer count as good? Aaron's held off, hoping survivors could be found, because of the respect between the chapters. But now, in the face of a very real, life-threatening prospect, that respect has become a double-edged sword, a very fragile thing, showing how easily it could all be broken. How the respecting of others' realms and territories can endear you to them, even foster those bonds of trust, yet how it all ultimately remains very fragile in a world of eternal war, in a breed of beings genetically created to wage it. And again for me, this comradeship between the Skulls and the Wolves display it all perfectly. As always everyone, what do you think? What do you think of the delicate tightrope of relations between Space Marine chapters? Is this situation with the Skulls here the perfect example? How through interactions a respect can be fostered between them, leading on to a sense of brotherhood, of then going further to learn each other's cultural ways, be aware of them, but in the end proving how ultimately fragile it all is. How existing in a world of eternal war makes things far more complicated than you would expect. How Aaron can't simply open fire on a powering up enemy first, because he fears the repercussions that could come after. Fears that once blood is spilt, the words of trust that were good enough previously may no longer be. As always, everyone, leave your thoughts in the comments below. A huge thank you to all my subscribers. Your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.